You have carried your burden, your sorrow, to another, seeking solace, but in return, you received only advice, judgment, or worse, their own story. You left feeling emptier, more alone. The reason for this is not what you think. The freedom from this cycle is the most profound discovery one can make. I implore you to listen to the very end, for the final insight contains the key. Seeking sympathy. Have you ever wondered, really looked into it, why we have this tremendous urge to tell another our problems? What is it we are actually seeking? Let us inquire into this together, not with judgment, not with condemnation, but with a simple, clear observation. We say we want help, we want a solution, but is that truly it? Or is it that the problem, the pain, the anxiety feels too heavy to hold alone? So we seek another person to share the burden. We want their sympathy, their energy, their attention to momentarily alleviate our own discomfort. It is like a psychological transference of a burden. In that moment of sharing, we feel a fleeting sense of relief. Someone else now knows. Someone else is carrying a piece of it with us. But what is this relief? It is a distraction, an escape from the actual fact of our own suffering, our own confusion. We have successfully moved the attention from the problem itself to the narration of the problem. And in that narration, we often embellish, we justify our position. We paint ourselves as the victim or the righteous one. The story becomes more important than the raw, unadorned fact of what is. This act of telling is a movement away from the problem, not towards it. And what does sympathy do? It comforts. It says, you are right to feel this way. It validates our misery. And in that validation, we find a strange comfort, a permission to remain in our state of conflict. The sympathy of another can become a subtle poison, a drug that dulls the sharp edge of the pain that is necessary to see, to understand, and to move beyond the problem. We become dependent on this external validation. When we don't receive it, we feel anger and resentment. They don't understand. So we search for another and another, going from person to person with our bowl of sorrow, begging for a few drops of sympathy, never realizing that this very act prevents us from ever being free of the bowl itself. This search for an outlet, for a listener, is rooted in a deep sense of psychological insufficiency. We do not feel we have the capacity, the intelligence, the energy to face our own turmoil directly. This is a belief implanted in us through centuries of conditioning that we need an external authority, a specialist, a savior, a friend to resolve our inner chaos. We have been taught to look outside of ourselves for salvation in every form. So when a problem of relationship, of fear, of loneliness arises, the first instinct is not to look, to observe, to understand, but to run. To run to the telephone, to a friend's house, to a forum, and externalize the issue. It is an escape from the laboratory of our own consciousness, which is the only place where truth can be discovered. This act of telling also fragments our energy. The energy that is required to look with full attention at a problem is immense. It requires your whole being. But when we tell one person and then another, we are dissipating that energy. We are scattering it. We are making ourselves weaker, more fragmented. Each telling is a leak in the container of our own attention, and so we are left with insufficient energy to actually confront the root of the problem. We are left only with the story, the memory of the problem, and the lingering, unsatisfactory feeling of having been heard but not helped. Because help cannot come from the outside for a problem that is born within. Distorted mirrors. Now, let us look at the other side of this equation. The listener. You go to your friend, your partner, your family with your pain. And what do? They listen. But how do they listen? Are they listening with a mind that is free, silent, and completely attentive? Or are they listening through the screen of their own experiences, their own prejudices, their own problems? Their listening is never pure. It cannot be. They hear your words, but they interpret them through the filter of their own conditioning. Their response, therefore, is not a response to your problem as it is, but a reaction from their own background. They offer advice. You should do this, or you should not have done that. This advice is born from their past, from their conclusions, from their fears. It is not born from a direct perception of your situation. It is the application of a memory, a formula, to a living, moving problem. How can a dead formula resolve a living thing? It cannot. So the advice, however well-intentioned, is a distortion. It adds another layer of confusion, another layer of conflict. Now you not only have your problem, but you also have the conflict of whether or not to follow their advice. You have introduced a second voice, an authority, into your own psyche. Or perhaps they do not offer advice, but they project their own anxieties onto you. Your story of loss triggers their own fear of loss. Your story of betrayal awakens their own memories of being betrayed. So they are no longer listening to you. They are listening to the echo of their own pain. Their response is to comfort themselves through you. They might offer platitudes and empty assurances, not to heal you, but to soothe their own reactivated fear. You came to them for clarity, and you are met with their confusion, their anxiety, beautifully disguised as concern. You are both now trapped in a shared illusion. Think of it, sirs, look at it. When you tell someone your problem, you are presenting them with a complex, moving, living psychological fact. To see that fact as it is requires a mind that is extraordinarily quiet and sensitive. But the person you are speaking to has their own life, their own struggles, their own pressing anxieties. They are occupied with their own me, their ambitions, their desires, their hurts. It is nearly impossible for them to put all of that aside and give you their complete undivided attention. Their me is listening to your me, and the dialogue between two centers of self-interest, of memory, of fear, can only ever lead to more conflict and more sorrow. It is a dialogue of ghosts. So you are speaking to a distorted mirror. The reflection you get back is not the truth of your situation, but a warped image, a caricature shaped by the uneven surface of the other's mind. And we do this to others, just as they do it to us. When someone comes to us with their problem, do we listen with silence? Or does our mind immediately start working, formulating a response, a solution, a judgment? We are so eager to respond, to show that we understand, that we fail to actually listen at all. True listening is an act of total passivity, of silence, in which the problem can unfold itself without interference. But we are not passive, we are not silent, we are aggressive participants, imposing our own noise upon the sorrow of another. Inner seeing. So, if telling another is an escape, a dissipation of energy, and if listening to another is to invite distortion and confusion, then what is one to do? This is the real question. What is the right action when one is confronted with a great problem, with immense psychological pain? The answer, if one is serious, is to not move at all, not to run, not to seek an escape, but to stay with the problem completely, to give it your total, undivided attention. This is an immense discipline, not the discipline of conformity or suppression, but the discipline of constant, choiceless awareness. When a problem arises, be it fear, jealousy, loneliness, sorrow, the first thing we must see is that the problem is not separate from the me who is observing it. The anger is not separate from me. I am anger. The loneliness is not an external cloud that descends upon me. The very structure of my consciousness, the me with its walls of self-interest, is loneliness. The observer is the observed. This is not a philosophical concept. It is an absolute psychological fact that one can discover for oneself. As long as we believe the problem is out there and I am in here looking at it, there is a division. And in this division, there is conflict. The me wants to get rid of the problem, to conquer it, to run from it. But what happens when one realizes in a flash of insight that there is no division, that the thinker is the thought, that the experiencer is the experience? In that moment, the entire structure of escape and conflict collapses. There is no me to run from the problem because the me is the problem. There is only the fact of loneliness, the fact of fear, the fact of sorrow. There is only the state itself. There is no entity fighting against it. All the energy that was previously wasted in resisting, in telling, in seeking sympathy is now fully present. Your entire being is that energy, that flame of sorrow or fear. And then what takes place? When you give this undivided attention to the fact of what is, without judgment, without desire to change it, without any movement of thought, the fact itself begins to transform, because the fact was held in place by the me, by the observer who was separate from it. When the observer is the observed, there is only seeing. And this seeing is not an act of will. It is a state of silent, alert, passive awareness. In this silence, the problem, which is rooted in the past, in thought, in the self, has no soil in which to continue its existence. It withers. This is not a process in time. It is not that you practice this for a week and then you are free. It happens in an instant of total insight. It is to see the whole mechanism of the self, the me, that creates the problem, that separates itself from the problem, and then seeks a solution in time and through others. To see this whole movement is to end it. It requires an extraordinary honesty with oneself, to admit that you are not separate from your own greed, your own violence, your own despair. You are it. In that total acceptance of what is, there is a radical transformation. This is the only true revolution. Silent freedom. Therefore, the injunction to not tell people your problems is not a cynical rule of social conduct. It is not about becoming a cold, isolated, unfeeling person. On the contrary, it is the doorway to a profound sensitivity and intelligence. It is to learn to be a light unto oneself. When you no longer run to another for comfort, you are forced to find the capacity for understanding within yourself. You discover a strength you never knew you possessed, the strength of pure, unadulterated attention. You cease to be a psychological beggar. You stand on your own feet, not in arrogance, but in humility. This inner silence, this capacity to be with your own turmoil without escaping, is the birth of real compassion. Because you have understood the nature of your own sorrow, you can understand the sorrow of another. When another comes to you with their problem, you will not offer them the cheap currency of advice or sympathy. You will offer them something infinitely more precious, your silent, total, non-judgmental attention. You will be a mirror for them, a clean, untarnished mirror in which they can see the nature of their own problem for themselves. You help them by not helping. You give them the space and the silence to have their own insight. This is the greatest act of love, of friendship. To not impose yourself, your conclusions, your experiences upon another, but to create an atmosphere of freedom in which they can flower, in which they can discover their own truth. This requires the complete setting aside of your own me, your own ego. And this is only possible if you have done the work yourself, if you have faced your own demons in the silent arena of your own mind. You cannot lead another out of a forest that you are still lost in yourself. So do not tell people your problems, not out of pride, but out of a deep reverence for the truth. The truth is that the solution to any psychological problem lies in its total dissolution, and that dissolution can only happen in the silent, choiceless awareness of one's own consciousness. Your problems are your teachers, your gurus. They are the gateways to self-knowledge. To hand them over to another is to refuse the greatest lesson life can offer. It is to choose to remain a child, forever seeking a hand to hold in the dark. The real path is to become the light itself. And in that light, which is the light of attention, all darkness, which is the problem created by the self, ceases to be. There is no struggle, no becoming, no achievement. There is only the simple, immense, and silent freedom of what is. For years, I've been a fixer. My friends come to me, I give advice, I feel useful, and I've always gone to others to have my own problems fixed. I've been wondering why I always feel so exhausted and nothing ever really changes. This just shattered that entire paradigm. The idea that true help is silent attention and the real work is internal. It's both terrifying and the most liberating thing I've ever heard. Thank you.